Thank you. So welcome to How a Solo Hobbyist Learned to Love Testing. My name is Carl James, so we're going to talk about testing here. I have read, watched, and listened to a lot of content on testing, including the attitudes of professional developers towards testings and the reasons why they do it. A couple of things I've seen, my boss told me to do it. I work on a team and we all want to be sure that we aren't breaking each other's code. I don't like debugging. I've also heard some things about why even pros don't want to test, like it takes too much time. I'm really good, I don't need to. And I love debugging. Well, I'm a solo hobbyist, which means that I have no team to deal with, and I have no boss to answer to. So like pro devs, I also don't have a lot of time to code. So the question you might be asking then is, what would compel someone like me to both do testing and love it? I've been coding as a hobbyist for 10 years. In my day job, I work in IT and AV user support at Indiana University. I took a summer course on campus in programming geared towards undergrads who were not computer science majors. This course happened to be taught in Python, which was my introduction to the language, and I took to it rather well. So this is the thing. If you take nothing else from this talk, take this. You too can go from zero to maintaining several minor production applications for no extra pay in just 10 short years. Dream big, folks. Okay, I jest. In truth, I find Python in particular to be quite accessible to folks like me who want the power and customization of code. The community around Python backs that up, whether you are a pro or a hobbyist, so I want to thank the community, which is why I'm here. Okay, since a full-time job, a spouse, 3 children, including one here, and a hobby writing computer code clearly doesn't fill up a week. I also have an obsession with college baseball. At least it gave me a subject to develop programs for. The first significant application I developed in regard to college baseball was an expert system, which means it didn't use like machine learning or anything like that, that would predict the pairings for the annual NCAA Division I college baseball tournament. I wrote this application in 2018. This application scraped data from 2 major websites. It would then create a dictionary with key metrics and then pass that dictionary to multiple methods in various classes that would adjust those metrics based on secondary metrics and in the end pop out a fully seeded tournament bracket. When I originally wrote the proposal for this talk, I did not remember writing tests at all for this application. As I was preparing the talk, though, I went back into my GitHub history and looked through it and discovered I had written tests. I guess the reason I had forgotten was that they were not very comprehensive. On top of that, the application was highly coupled and brittle, not something I could realistically write good tests for after the fact or maintain. A few years ago, I moved on from that project and pivoted to creating a new website. This one built with the Django framework that would let me eventually build multiple dynamic apps for fans of Indiana University baseball. The first of these apps was to provide me personally with an interface to quickly produce a live game blog of IU baseball games. The fan group that I'm part of has an established WordPress site, and I had been doing my live blog on that WordPress site. One of the things I did at the end of each inning was to provide a scoreboard header. The only way I saw to do that in WordPress was to boilerplate it, copy-paste, and then do some edits each time. That's time-consuming, especially given that you've only got 2 minutes between innings. I found that I spent more time, copying, pasting, and tweaking than I actually did, typing out my thoughts on the game, which is kind of the point. So by creating this more dynamic Django application, I was able to automate most of the processes to where all I had to do was essentially submit a form that would automatically increment the innings and allow me to make slight adjustments to stats such as hits, runs, and errors. All right, well, I learned the Django framework primarily through Will Vincent's book series on the topic, which I had purchased online versions of, and I would highly recommend if you are into wanting to learn about Django. That is something I would really recommend. At the beginning, I did testing in the way that Will Vincent's training proposed, which was to use Django's built-in unit testing framework and write tests after each new functionality was developed each time. Learning a significant framework like Django can be a little bit daunting for a hobbyist. I was able to get it to work, but found myself relying on notes I'd taken in Markdown and Will Vincent's book when creating a new view. I found that I would often miss a step in the whole process. Now, through the process of debugging, I would eventually make it work. Sometimes I would forget to write a new template. Sometimes I would forget to put in the URL patterns. It always seemed to be something. I couldn't get all of the components of the request-response cycle correct the very first time. Well, after the first season that I did it with this blog, I wanted to make some improvements to what I'd already done, and I also wanted to start adding new features. And at this point, I had also become more exposed to test-first concepts. It wasn't clear to me at that point, though, if the request-response cycle was truly testable in that way. The problem I saw with it was kind of like a chicken and an egg problem. The Python view code needs model data and a template to render HTML to the browser. It also needs the URL to route a request to that view. The URL, however, needs the view to exist to point at it. Where do I start? I wasn't sure. But I got going with test-driven development, TDD. I wrote a request and tested for a response. And then from there, I just kind of saw where it took me. I let the test failure guide me. I was also building out a second app in which it turned out to be a little bit more complicated from a database model perspective. This is a player tracking system. I added new views to this Django app by writing the tests first. I got myself into kind of a more regimented pattern when creating a new view. After a while of doing this, I had an epiphany. So now what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through how I discovered this. So I am going to need to set the microphone down, but I'll keep it up here so that the video will at least pick it up. And I will try to speak a little loudly. Okay. Okay, so what I've got here are I've already written out the tests here. So I've got tests in PyTest. What I've done to start off with is it's just 4 tests here. And I've marked them all with PyTests .mark.xfail, which basically means they're expected to fail. So if I go to terminal and run those tests, we'll see that, and I've got a subsection of tests here that are included. So 7 tests pass. The 4 that you just saw there, those are the ones that are expected to fail. So if we go back to the code, and I'm going to remove that expected failure, save that, go back to the terminal, let's run the tests again. All right, one's true failure. And what I do is I take a look here, and it actually, the error message helps me out. It says that we don't have a URL. So kind of jump the gun here. So this test is basically saying that we're going to look for the URL for draft transactions. That's what we're calling this page. And what we're testing for is just that we get back a status code of 200, which just means it's a good status code. So right now we're not getting that, and the reason we're not getting that is because the URL it's not generating a URL for that. So if we go to the URLs, I'm going to cheat here and copy paste. Copy pasting isn't all bad. So we'll make this, we're adding one draft transactions, copy that. I'm going to name the view the same thing and name this URL pattern the same thing. Save that. Terminal and run. Oh boy, now I've broken the rest of the app. Because, well, what have I done? We've added a view that doesn't actually, we're pointing to a view that doesn't exist, kind of that chicken and the egg problem. That's okay. So we can go to drafted players, and what we can do here is go ahead and add another player, add another view. So draft transactions. We will go ahead and pass that a request since we know this is a request. And for now, I'm just going to say pass so that we have, oops, spelling's important. So let's run this again. Okay, well, at least we haven't broken the entire application again. But what we do have here is we didn't return an HTTP response. So this exists, but it's not really doing anything yet. So let's, again, steal. So this is pointing to a template. Let's make it the template that we want. Draft transactions. There's context. It's highlighted because it doesn't exist yet. So let's add some context, which in this case will just be an empty dictionary. Nothing yet. Save. Go back. We run this again. Okay, we still have a failure. But the issue here is now that the template does not exist, because we haven't made it yet. So let's go up to that. New file. Draft transactions.html. Let's save that, just a blank template. Here we go, everything passes. So what I've basically, kind of learned through this was that I didn't have a list of what I needed to do. I just set the test, and then I let the errors guide me. And the errors basically told me, the first thing you need to do is the URL. So I went to the URL, went through each space to get a response. Now, all we have right now is, all we have at this point, though, is just a response. It's just saying, hey, this is a web page. It doesn't actually do anything yet. So since time still permits, let's do the next test. So the next test basically says that there is this string in the response, and that string is the title of the page that we want. So let's now go back to the terminal since we have removed the expected failure. And here we are. We have now a true failure. And this is okay. It's just an assertion. Hey, what you're looking for, it isn't there. So that isn't necessarily as helpful as the whole URL thing. So let's go to, let's get some context here. So I'm going to add a page title to this. And I'm going to cheat and steal from the test. All right, and then we also need to add this to the template that gets rendered. So I'm going to copy a different template here. Again, I love stealing, especially when I'm crunched for time. Okay, so we've got some boilerplate essentially. That's all I've done is just boilerplate. I got rid of most of the content, but it does pass that page title to that part in the boilerplate. So I save that, or at least it should. We don't know yet for sure. Ah, yes it does. We do know for sure. We know for sure now. Okay. So we still have some time, so let's try another one. So this test now is asking for a specific player and a specific transaction, which is that former Indiana University baseball player Nick Mitchell signed a professional contract. So let's mark that. Let's remove the mark of that test, go back to our terminal, run our tests, and boom, again, we have a failure. So if we want to let's go to the view in our context. Let's add, oops. This needs to be a string, I know this, transactions. And those will be, we just need to pull some information from the database. So I've got something that's called a trans event, is what it's called. And we are looking for signed professional contract. Again, this is part that isn't going to be as guided by the tests. I know that in order for it to render, it needs something in the template. So we got to do something here in the template. So I'll put a header tag. And we just need to pass that data. So I'm going to start with, oops. Help if I ran the for loop. Okay, what I first need to do is create a for loop in the template. So it's looking for transaction and transactions. And then, so we want that, we want the date of the transaction. I know that's not in the test, but it makes it look pretty in the end. And then, so I want to reference the specific player and that player's first name. Do a space, transaction, same player, and the player's last name. So essentially this loops over all of them and gives that information, comma, and then that trans event, which is the signed, in this case, signed professional contract. So we save that, go back to the terminal. Okay, we made up, yeah, I've done that almost every time. Transactions. All right. Oh. Ah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So that did not work. Well, that's part of live demos. Messed something up here. Okay, well, again, that part isn't as important, but when you key this, it'll eventually go through, and I'd go through some debugging, but we don't really have time for significant debugging here. So what I'm going to do now is go back to our slides. All right. Okay, so we got the gist of this. So without consulting any documentation, what I did is I came up with a clear order of coding the basics of a view. So again, it kind of pointed me first. Route the URL with a view function or class, write the view, return an HTTP response, point the view to a template, write a database query, and then pass the data to the template. I had been writing these views for several years, because not only did I have this app, but I had a crafting app from my to assist my mother-in-law with. But I didn't intuitively understand what Django was doing. What Django was doing to take that request and transform it into a response. And I find by going through this process, I have a much better intuitive understanding of, okay, this is what it's going through and this is what it's doing. As an amusing bonus, this slide here shows my commits on GitHub for the past year. Can anyone intuit from this when college baseball season is? Yeah, it's that little part between February and June there. Yeah. Well, this brings me to another reason I love a complete test suite. I go a huge chunk of time each year without digging into code. It's so much easier to jump right back in the summer when I can run the suite, know the code is working, and keep running the tests as I make changes, being very confident that I'm not breaking anything while I get my brain back up to speed on the repository. So even though I don't have a team to work with, I myself will be different at the end of a baseball season than I was at the beginning of it. In addition to the fact that I do have the advantage that I am at least most of the time the customer, so there is a little bit of an advantage there. And I want to be clear, I'm not trying to preach. While I have a fascination with professional development, I don't have high pressure deadlines or bosses to deal with. That being said, I also don't have a great deal of time. Testing provides me with a structure and peace of mind. It gives me the confidence to dive back in and make my app better in the hopes that fans of Indiana University baseball will have insights that fans of some other top programs around the country lack. So I have a little blogging website. It's not showing up now. Hold on. From current slide. There we go. Okay. So that's me. You can go to jovian34.com. I've got some stuff that I've blogged on there. It's a little old, but it's on there. I'm also at Jovian34 on Mastodon. I don't have any of these slides up yet because I finished them before I started here today, but I might try to come and maybe put that up on Mastodon or something. So tad bit early, but thank you all. Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have a few minutes for a few questions. So,
what you do in test-driven development, have you figured out you may run yourself down rabbit holes?
Occasionally, yeah. I mean, I've gone down multiple rabbit holes with coding in general, but Yes, I've gotten down a few rabbit holes before where I'll be like, sometimes I'll get drawn into the big problem. Sometimes I'll get drawn into spending more time working on tests than I do on the actual code. But what I've really done, and I'm not really obsessive at making sure that I have a test for each and every function. What I'm testing is the behavior. This is what I want out of it. And I do want test coverage, mostly because I want all of the code to execute in the tests. But I'm also not worried about, okay, did each little line of code have its own specific test? If the code runs during part of this process, I'm happy with it, and I just, the lack of time kind of helps because I have to stop at some point.
Hey, I was curious about your thoughts about the kind of utility of tests kind of in the moment when you're writing the code versus like later when you're coming back to the code. Do you ever find yourself deleting tests? Like, for example, I think the name was Nick Mitchell. Will that test always be true? Like in a few years, will the website still show Nick Mitchell, or will it only show more recent data?
Yes, that's a test fixture that's put in there, so that will always be there. He is a real player. I based all of my tests off of real data, but the actual app has a lot more current data that isn't reflected. And I also write the fixtures so that the dates and times are all relative to now, so that's how the tests stay up to date. But yeah, eventually Nick Mitchell will hopefully be retired from Major League Baseball by the time, and he'll still be in there. Yeah.
All right, I guess that's a wrap.